Hi, everyone, and welcome to MAP. Thank you for joining us today for the talk Unboxing the Artist Book. It is with pleasure that I introduce the speakers for today. We are joined by artists Ravikumar Kashi, Ramesh Kalkur, and Jayasimha Chandrashekhar. This talk is conceptualized around We Don't End at Our Edges, the works of Ravi, featuring the works of Ravi. Just some house rules before we begin. The bathrooms are outside along with the water fountains. Please keep your phones on silent and you can do as much photography as you'd like, just without flash. I'm not going to waste too much time with introductions because I know it's on the agenda for today. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Jayasimha.
Okay, thank you, Kashi. Thank you all for beating the Bangalore traffic and being here for this very nice conversation. I mean, it's actually quite special for me because it's both RKs, I fondly call them, Ravi Kashi and Ramesh Kalkur. And I've always had this pleasure working with them as a collaborator in terms of printing or, whatever their artistic journeys are. And I'm very glad on that. So I'm not going to take a lot of time introducing the artists because you all know who they are and you know their practices. I'm just going to set up the stage for today's conversation, and we have tried to do our homework. We have kept 4 brief questions, and we would like to revolve around that. A book is something which has got a spine. This is one of my students from a teaching unit. She sort of came up with Abhita. What happens when a spine becomes a site or a site? It is often said that the book, as a cultural object, is democratic in nature. It exists within the broad spectrum of access of culture, language, and privilege. Historically, this access has been dictated by the constraints of patronage. For centuries, books remained bound within the elite circles of power and privilege, their reach limited by wealth and influence. However, with the advent of mechanical reproduction, this dynamic shifted. The book is no longer confined to the hands of the few. It has become a widely accessible medium, a true vessel of knowledge for all. Yet, despite this transition, the book, like quote unquote, has undergone a complex transformation. It did not remain solely as a democratic object. It evolved into something more like a codex, a document, or an oratic entity, carrying a unique presence and significance beyond its function as a mere transmitter of information. Often, a book is not just a direct expression of ideas in an aesthetic manner, but a profound metaphor, a form in itself, and in some cases, an artistic medium. Joan Drucker, an American author, in her seminal work, The Century of Artist Books, captures this essence very beautifully. I quote, "The compelling quality of artist books is the way in which they call attention to the specific character of the book's identity, while they embody the expressive complexity of the book as a communicative form." I continue quoting, "Artist books open up new and unexpected ways of storytelling, challenging traditional notions of content and form." As Drucker further notes, without linking the content and form of the book into any established agenda, artists are free to redefine the essence of the book itself. But this leads us to a fundamental question: when does a book become an artist's book? Is it simply through the assurance of an artist's intent? If so, does this not draw us into the murky waters of authenticity and the very concept of originality? The lines blur, compelling us to reconsider the book as not just an object of reading, but as an art form in its own right. Even in today's ever-expanding era of artificial intelligence, where digital forms are rapidly redefining media, the book holds its place whether as a tangible artifact or even as an e-book. The essence of storytelling, artistic expression, and intellectual discourse remains intact, proving that while the medium may evolve, the book's cultural and artistic significance endures. Today, let's explore how artist books continue to challenge our perceptions of authenticity, creativity, and meaning with Ravikumar Kashi and Ramesh Kalkur. I would like to welcome Ramesh and Ravi on the stage, please. Thank you, Ravi sir and Ramesh, for being with us here. I think I'm just going to stay truthful to our plan and not deviate anywhere, hopefully. I would like to open up with this first question. Are artist books as a form influenced by context? If so, does their form shape that context? And basically, I want you both to respond from your own perspectives or your own chairs to the question.
The first set of works, which I didn't even know they are called artist books, were done around 99, 2000. Even the earlier version of this, actually, the first slide that we saw. Later, when I went to Glasgow to study paper making there, in the library there, I started looking at books which talked about the idea of artist books, and then that is how the idea became more and more clear, and it got its own direction. But the way I arrived at this idea of artist books was, in my painting, I was using this two-sided format. Like when you open a magazine, there is one side an entire story about murder or a mayhem, and the other side there will be a story or an advertisement of a beautiful jewelry. We don't see them as connected. But I was trying to juxtapose them and also bring this idea together that they are somehow interconnected and they affect each other. And that split canvas kind of image I wanted to make as a work. That's how the first set of book-like work started coming. And then later, of course, it became more and more clear. The form in my works depends on what I'm trying to convey through the work. So then I found a medium which can help me in that. So in terms of, if you think of unity of idea, form and material, I think for me those three things have to align to make a good expression. So of course it will be a context will be there where I'm showing it. For example, I did this show on copper sheet, which was about changing of the constitution and all that, and it was shown abroad, and then they understood that in a very different way as compared to what it would be read as in India. So it's a combination of the intent that one has and the medium and the form and the context. So it's a coming together.
Ramesh, would you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess all forms are driven by context, but I think when you pose this question around art, you're basically drive us to the fact that book has got its own baggage. I'm not even calling it history at this point of time. It has a baggage of historical connotation. I think you nicely set it up in a way, even by taking examples of three artists where book can work as a medium, book can work as a material. When I say material, it's not necessarily physical material. And you can see some of the examples of Ravi's work. And when I made these notes, I had not seen Ravi's work, but it seemed to connect where book works as a medium as well as material, and book as an object. So all these three possibilities are there. Not necessarily it has to be one or the other. Sometimes in a given piece of artist book work, my works will come later, but there is a lot of connection between the two. It's a book as a medium, book as a material, and book as an object. Material, medium, object work with a different degree of importance in a way. So what happens is that all these three canons provide rich context for the artist, because you can play with, at times you can play with medium as a medium, at times you can play with book as a material and book as an object. So these three trajectories, and kind of how do you negotiate between these three trajectories? It's always an interesting playground. End of the day, artist book as a book is an object, right? Whether you've drawn, written, painted, image or text. So end of the day, it becomes an object. This objectification brings, maybe I'm complicating a bit, but objectification of a book brings cultural, social, political context, and it does complicate. And Ravi nicely kind of pointed out how we become numb to two sides of the paper. A newspaper is a book in another way. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll take it forward.
I think
later.
probably what I gather from this, from what both of you have said, is this nature of it being dynamic between its form and its context. And maybe if we can go back and Ravi sir, you have been working with paper for more than 2 decades, and so how is your practice in paper making when you make these independent objects like sculptures or drawings, and you're deeply involved in paper making, and then suddenly you come back into a complicated form like book. So maybe if you can talk about that, because yeah.
Just for the clarity of the audience, artist books, if you want to get a clarity in artist books, I would compare that with writer's books, right? In a writer's book, there would be an occasional illustration or a cover page, etc. But it's largely filled with text and what it can, invoke, like narratives and memory and logic and all that. An artist book would be more visual and more object-oriented, more physicality, all that will come. And in that, there are 3 different varieties. One is the idea of a book object, like it invokes the book form, but you can't really turn the pages, like that work. So it has the reference to book and book form and all that. And then the book, from the time it started, has a connection with knowledge and documentation, power, and all these things are there. So you invoke that also in that. And then second kind of book is where there are multiple pages, you can build a narrative, there is a sequence, there is an order, you start an argument and then you can take it to the end of it, which is not available in a painting. Because in a painting you tend to look at the whole thing in one go. But in a book you have to really turn page after page, and it allows you to have a time element to that. And third kind of books are altered books, like you can take an existing book, paint something on it, cut it, things like that. Like I had done one book where it was a religious text, but I cut a form in that where you can hide a pistol kind of thing. Like you're talking about the idea of a religion holding within itself the possibility of a violence and things like that. Or you can take some text and redact some part of it and so on. Like I had done another book which was a book about measurements, but I inserted arguments about aesthetics and then love and things like that which cannot be measured easily. So those are the 3 kind of large formats. And then the 4th format is the photo books, which also is possible. So paper making for me, it was not like I came here and went there. Many things happened simultaneously. I was doing paper making, so book became natural. I write on art and I write otherwise. So there are many things which are coming together in the form of book. So in that sense, it is not separated from my other practices. And I don't do like, okay, for this 6 months I will do painting. Doesn't happen like that. In one room, I will be doing book, in another room something else. So it's like jumping or connecting it, cross-pollinating it, all that will happen in one go. I don't know whether I've answered the...
Well, yeah. So maybe I'll bounce back again just to Ramesh. I mean, your oeuvre of work is mostly to do, if I can say this, you're associated with a lot of painting and photographic works, especially when you came back from RCA and you started doing those works. What sort of made you feel interested in this particular form?
So you're saying I'm not a sculptor? Okay,
Well,
that's okay. Yeah, I did sculpture too. But no, I'll pick it up from where Ravi has left, that I can do one thing in one room, another thing, something else and something else. Connecting back to your question, I think, yes, as a even painter, sculptor, you can do many. But when you deal with one book in one space, another book, another space, it has happened to me that, wrong to say, that in meetings I used to work on drawings in a book, and then you do a different kind of book in a meeting and you do different kind of book in a studio, you do a different kind of book at home. So it's a home dining table book making is different from, so there is a sense of which I might come back to it later, that when you close the book, it disappears. I mean, that's the magic of it, which I really like. So that's where it becomes dynamic, in the sense that you can, yeah, I mean, the book as a form, you can basically, you can reverse it. It can be upside down. In fact, strangely, I started this book today, I was writing, then I started from the other end. I don't know why. Well, this book has a possibility to use it from different side. Good book can be longer than it should be. If so, what drives that is always a question. Number of pages in a book can be lesser than what it can be called as a book. Book can be something that cannot be opened. Great example of that, Ravi's work. So basically I'm talking about size, scale, volume, orientation, form of experiencing the book. It's very different when, even within Ravi's work, which you will see also in my work, that one book, the experience of seeing that book, where you can't open but you can say that it's all about that, versus an openable book. So experience, form of viewing, and then accessibility, historicity, even the idea of sequentiality. All of it is in a question, no? I mean, all of it can be changed. So that's where it becomes dynamic.
Well, I think you just opened up for my second question. So now that you both have sort of gone into the rabbit hole of the form of a book, I just want to ask, like, since the end of the day, it's about storytelling, and you're trying to tell something to the viewer. And I'm gonna I borrowed a new question from this. I'm improvising right away. So what is the role of sequence in a narrative, in an artist's book? And if there is sequence, what is the agency of the viewer, someone who is viewing the book? Would you think about your audience while you're trying to tell a story, or you would never think about your audience? Maybe first, if you both can talk about the sequence, and then we can look at the agency of the viewer.
No, the very idea of flipping through a book allows you to bring that sequence, because there is no way you can see all the pages in one go. When you want to see the next page, you have to let go of this, like how we said, you can fold it and keep it away. And the size of the intimate scale of the book, that adds to that whole idea of, you can just, like a secret, you can keep it away, even after working for 6 months and not really open it and all that. But sequence to me is something which cannot be done very easily in a large painting, because all the painting comes to you at one go. You can create some way of ordering the information in a way that, okay, look at this area first and then that and that, but still it's not like, in Bangkok, in the palace of Rama King, there is a mural outside the palace, and as you walk through, you will see the narrative, and then it unfolds. That is sequence, like in a cinema. So there is, the storytelling happens in a time and space kind of thing. That is possible in artist book, which a normal size painting will not allow you to do.
Ramesh, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I take that cue that singularity of the image versus book getting closed and opened. I think sequentiality, negotiating the sequentiality is an interesting part of this medium. Anyway, we are splitting the hair by splitting the book. But saying sequence is to do with narrative may not be ideal, because I can always make it non-narrative. I mean, there are some of my books where just certain form gets repeated. There's no narrative per se. Or you can kind of de-sequence it. Like, again, Ravi brought up the idea of media. The way, I mean, any media, animation, film, basically moving images. where you can go back and forth now when you watch it in your phone. You can go 10 frames, 20 frames. Similarly, you can go back and forth when you're viewing the book. And then this starts, I have seen people doing that even when they're going through my book where, oh, there's something which was there in page 4 and they look for that and connecting. So in a way, they build a sense of interconnectivity. They all become part of one community. And then what are you doing here? How are you? Especially some of my books which are connected in terms of page 1 to page 5 or page 10. And then there is somewhere the referencing of some other page in some other, which also happens in writer's book where chapter 5 refers to chapter 1. So you do build, but you don't have to build something sequentially. Like sometimes I don't start my book on page 1 and go all the way to. Yes, I know when the viewer picks up that book, you are always starts in the beginning. I thought, how do I confuse that by putting a title on either side of the book? Then comes the orientation, which I was talking earlier. Then if you have a floating form, then orientation also is negotiated. So in a way, even negotiate, I keep coming back to the idea of negotiation that happens in a book, especially in a book with sequentiality. We already established there are 3 different kinds of book, but with the narrative, sequentiality, non-narrative, desequencing, all those are the possibilities of a book.
Well, I think it's...
Just want to add to that, the narrative need not be linear narrative. Yeah. It can be a non-linear narrative, that is one thing. And there are some books, like the whole narrative just explodes, and then, like it's strewn all around the book. That is also possible. Like one book which I have done, it is as though the book has come apart, and all the pages are displayed there. And some parts are lost and they are recovering and archiving. So it's not necessarily sequencing means it's a linear flowing of the information or narrative.
Well, now I'm a little more curious because, okay, so what happens, I think with whatever points you both made, what happens when there is a form within a form? And how do you negotiate that? Like often, like when you're trying to tell a story, because is it like one is trying to plaster a set of emotions on this particular form called book, or yeah, as Ramesh opened it up, the idea of negotiating a page, but it's almost like real estate, right? You're dealing with one page and another page, and then you go back, and by virtue of that, it gives you a lot of time. There's a particular, like, there's a sense of temporality, as you were saying. You can draw in a meeting, you can draw in a car, you can, while in transit. How does that affect? Have you faced challenges in those things?
No, when you say negotiating, it is about trying to find the right kind of expression for the idea that you have. You are trying to express through the book. Because at least with me, most of the books start with an idea, and then you are trying to figure out how it can be conveyed in a certain way and so on. So the negotiation is between trying to find the right scale, right form, and the medium and things like that. So that is where the negotiation would happen. And as you are working on the book, there are some things which the process throws up, then you adopt that or reject that. That is also possible.
And also I want to make a small observation, since I've worked very closely with both of you. To give a small context, this is also a first time I'm getting a chance to have a conversation with people whom I'm collaborating, because usually I'll be working in a studio setting. We are more driven in the conversation of what the form is, what are we dealing with, and things like that. It's nice that we are out of that setting and we are talking about that. So basically, what I wanted to ask is, most of these books, I mean, this is also an observation because of the collaboration, most of these books have a standard format in both of your practices, or like it's something like a book which has a which has a form which is borrowing from a hardbound book kind of a thing. I'm curious why, like, I've seen some parts of accordion kind of, with both Ramesh and your interpretation, but suddenly somewhere, what I feel is when it goes away from this standard format and becomes a zine or something, people have the tendency to treat it as a sculptural object more. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about that. Do you see it in that way, or do you just use it as an available format?
No, two points. One is like something like this can be treated as a relief sculpture, and there are some work which are made which are like proper sculptures, if you want to call that as a sculpture. But I am yet to go away from the boundaries of visual recognition of the book form. Maybe one of these days it will happen. But yeah, I am in my mind, I'm thinking about why I have to keep coming back to that form.
That particular
and not
form.
go away from that.
Yeah.
There are one or two works where I've taken one narrative and then it goes away in different directions. I think it came this one before. It's done like one circle becomes one story, and then it keeps exploding and it goes in different directions. That is one idea where I try to go away from the actual book form.
Okay, so Ramesh, would you?
Well, a small story. Basically, when I was lugging around, whatever, 6-foot canvas, 7 kg roll in Bombay trains when I was studying in Baroda, in order to show it to galleries and somehow get some money to support the material. Yeah, 9 o'clock train going from whatever, Bandra to Churchgate. You can imagine how. I mean, I'm painting a picture of struggling art student, and then you always felt that what can I do?
The struggle
you
is
know,
real.
I think seed was planted there. Somewhere I felt if I could walk into a gallery with 4 matchboxes and 10 works in each matchbox and just take it out and put it on the table and see whether you would like to buy this. If you don't close it and put it in your pocket and walk out. So you always felt that, what is this huge, I mean, we used to make this, sorry for nostalgic trip, but we used to make this cardboard files and then put everything inside, and really, I mean, so somewhere I had this, but like Ganjifa cards, and there's history to that. But I think between the two, negotiation of doing these large works, which I was always interested in, 8x5 or 6x4 canvases, to matchbox, I mean, work within a matchbox. So that negotiation, again, I'm bringing negotiation back, came to the book in between. So if I can't put it in my pocket, this book goes in my pocket, but I can always put it in my bag. And you feel nice to carry your own work within your bag rather than. So the idea of form, even though I'm talking about convenience here, but I think since I already told you that the engaging with the form of a book, because it allows for various level of interpreting that form through, as an object, as a medium, as a material. It's really like, for me, it feels like a Pandora's box. Every time I open a book from the box, every time I see a different, seem to be, I'm taking out a different book. It's magical. Yeah, I love the form as of now.
I'm just going to borrow this image. Can we go back to that previous image? Yeah. This, I know, it's a very special work for you, and maybe I think you should talk about it.
No, this was done when my father passed away. A few months after that, The paper itself was made from the white panche cloth he was wearing, and then I used this janivara, that is the sacred thread, which is in a Brahmin community, just to remove it is sacrilege, but I cut that, and then the book is about what my father said and how I responded to that. And when I agree with him, the rule book on the left side will continue on the right side. If I don't agree, then it goes haywire. And then there are various, sometimes verbally said, sometimes non-verbally conveyed suggestions by father. So that was the book. Many people who saw this book were able to respond to it, and they thought it as their own experience, because no parent and child relationship is straightforward. There are always areas which are complicated and all that. So that was that book. But the word which I was trying to bring to his this one was the idea of compression. The book is about compressing large ideas into small format, so that it becomes very intimate and you spend more time going through that. And so in a painting it gets elaborated. Here it gets compressed.
I mean, probably I'll borrow convenience and both the C's, and look at, for me, the immediate, yeah, we can go ahead. The immediate thought was like the landscape painting, where it was like so positioned within an artist's studio, and slowly when the easel was introduced, suddenly it changed the entire dynamic. So when Ramesh was talking about the convenience of the form, where you can carry your story wherever you're doing, and each time you're trying to, whenever you find time, you're working with that. That's actually a very interesting sort of, I feel that's an interesting trigger point to ask this particular question is, if you can both of us sort of open it out for us, your insights, because you're always involved with this form, whether you go as a very serious, meticulous studio practice 9 to 10 or wherever you're finding your time. How has it influenced the form itself, what you're doing? And the second thing is maybe your experience in making these forms. Have you ever tried that, going back into a painting or a sculpture vis-a-vis, some insights about your engagement with the idea of making a book?
I think they can run quickly, so they'll also see his works. Otherwise,
Can we go
quickly, yeah. Yes,
yeah.
that's better. Now there'll be some comparison. Yeah. Okay. you want to respond to it, Ramesh?
You have examples also.
No, I stopped somewhere, but I think since we established from your book of Xerox and by an artist, and then Yoko Ono's work and the book as an object sculpture, I think we did illustrate at least two of it through Ravi's work, where it became sculptural, and then book as a material with his the panche from his father. So, what interests me is that book is a metaphor for time, right? I think when he talked about compressing, that was interesting in a sense that when it's a metaphor for time, you can expand it and compress it, expand it and compress it. And that seemed to be the process when you're dealing with your book, when you're working on a particular book. Sometimes it sounds like, or it feels like that time is ever expanded, because page after page after page you're dealing with it, especially when you use book as a medium. And then once it is done, it's closed, suddenly you feel that time got compressed. So I think that book as a metaphor of time is what interests me. And another aspect, yes, we are talking about time and space, but another aspect is that the space. So sometimes I feel book is like architectural in nature, because you keep creating different spaces within, like what you said earlier, form within a form. Like book itself is a structure, and within that structure you keep opening new spaces, right? And you take people around that space. It's all, you almost become a guide to people to take around. And as it happens to guides, I've seen when people look at a particular book, they just want to quickly go through the space so that they know what this whole space comprises of. There are people who go and come back, keep coming back, or there are people who just go slowly, not worried about where I'm going to, what is the destination, where I'm going to reach, but let me enjoy where I am. So there are different kind of viewers. So I'll quickly bring it to the idea of audience within a book, and that's an interesting factor. Ravi compared that painting and book, that's why I brought it up. So as soon as I give a book, people will find a chair to sit. So that's an interesting part where it's my space, my time, and at times I have also seen this community viewing, no? That 2-3 people gather and see. So these both are very interesting because you already borrowed time from someone. You've stolen a time from someone, and some people are aware of that and quickly, where's my next book to see? So that the audience experience of having to sit and, I mean, when the book is of certain size, or even otherwise, you go to a table, you sit, and so that's a really. Sometimes I feel I achieved something because you cannot ignore, right? You have to. I mean, even people who want to quickly go through, they have to go through quickly all that. So the longer you make book, then so you can play with all this. I'm really looking at the playful side of. Relationship between artists and the audience.
Can I just quickly jump in since we have the example here? Unlike other books where when we see Ravi sir's work, this is a perfect example of an altered book. You found already existing material and you've intervened into it and you've worked with it. Maybe can you talk about that process? Like, because your base is already, your canvas has already got an undertone to it, and then you're painting more on top of it. What was your experience like working in this kind of a format?
Yeah, no, I found this, I don't know anything about music. I tried my best to learn guitar. It didn't happen. But as marks, they were interesting. So now I just felt that I do something. And then taking a title from Gonzalez's work, I forgot his first name. His work called Perfect Lovers, he has put 2 clocks pointed at the same time. So I just felt that it was interesting to kind of work with one book, cut it into 2. In fact, this morning I was thinking if I should have done other way around. The 2 books orientation, I could have complicated it. So yeah, altered book Ravi talked about. How do we work with altered book, and had great fun. I don't know. I can't say beyond that.
Ravi sir.
Okay. So at least some of the books have allowed me to think or bring clarity to my own thinking. Like I had done a trilogy of books about the idea of destiny and choice. Okay, the first one was a set of this jacquard weaving cards which I had collected from Suresh's place, and then I was thinking I'll make it like a palm leaf book, but then it was too strong in imagery, so I could not intervene. So I just made some extra holes in that, in those jacquard woven thing, thereby altering its destiny. Then second book was, if given set of choices, how do I respond to those choices? Like how do we succumb, how do we resist, or how do we play around and subvert and all that. And the third book was a set of transparent set of sheets where with the same set of choices, different kind of responses are made, and then that becomes a a set of very complex grid, and then it has got only one corner pivot, and then the whole book rotates. In that sense, the choice which I made years ago will come back and affect me in a certain way. And then when you start looking at a much bigger picture, you have one such very complex grid, you have one such, and then all our grids are intermingling and affecting each other. So that allowed me to look at how we operate, the idea of individual choice versus what comes from others in a very nice way. So ideas like this get clarified while doing the work, not before the work, but as the work is happening, it gets more and more crystallized, and when you're talking about it, when you're articulating about the book, it becomes more clear. So now what I want to do is I want to make multiple books in the exhibition, and then they all will have different choices, they'll all intermingle and all that. It's a little complicated, but something like that. Yeah.
Maybe I want to extend that with another small question. So when do you guys decide, okay, I've got an idea, this idea has to be a book? What influences you?
That's a secret. It happened many different times at different, sometime early in the morning when you are still waking up, sometime when you're walking. It's very difficult to say when. I mean, that's always a question. When do you decide your work is complete? There are these set of these questions. It's very difficult to answer. I think the reason for that is each piece of work. I mean, you don't have to say book alone. Any piece of work poses a different set of challenges, and that's where I don't know whether there's one answer to it. Ravi,
I like the word happens, because a large amount of decisions are taken by subconscious underpinnings and what happens without your conscious knowledge. So as you said again, early mornings, middle of the night, suddenly something happens and then you want to try it out. In my case, I have this set of books where I notate all my ideas, and then it is there. And sometimes, okay, let me try this in studio. So that's how it goes. Sometimes as you are trying to make it, some new idea comes in and then you alter it and then it goes further. So it's very rarely the initial idea to the final work, there is a straight line that can be drawn.
And I mean, that was actually, it summed it up. So if we can quickly go back to the question where we were at and look at the agency of the viewer, often what happens is, like, if I have a very nice book, I remember Chinar, another artist, she had made a book. For that book, I could go pick up the book and I could really, sit down and play around with. When they become unique books like this, how do you deal with that? The handling, people coming and using the book in a certain way, looking at it in a certain way. What are your thoughts about that?
When I show the book, we keep a set of gloves. People wear the gloves, and one by one they come and see the book. And if somebody is in a hurry, they are peeping as one person is flipping the book, and the other will see, and then they decide whether it's worth the time and not, and they go away.
Okay, and maybe if you can complicate that question a little bit, as I was in my opening remark, I was saying sometimes this is my personal feeling. What I feel is an artist book always demands for a certain kind of patronage, and that patronage is mostly institutional, and yeah, a lot of times the examples are that. And are you both aware of that when you're doing it, or you're not worried about all of that and you're just doing what you want to do? How that?
If you come to my studio, most of the artist books I've done are with me. So very few are sold. It doesn't matter. You like an idea, you want to explore, you do it. And its scale is small, so I can just put it away in a bureau and then it is there. It doesn't occupy too much of space. But some of the books have been collected by, like, Princeton University Library. They have a collection of artist books, or some museum has collected and things like that. But the awareness and then the collection capacity, or I would say inclination, has not yet taken root in our country as much.
And also,
I think it's connected to what you said earlier, that it's a viewing itself. It's not basically you're taking on too much of responsibility, right? And when you say buy a book, acquire a book, and maybe you're paying a lot, I don't know, but then you can't show it off. I mean, you can't put it up, and so it is a difficult scenario to work with. Now, you can manage between hard copy and digital. I think there is something, but at the same time, the problem or complication is that materiality of a book. Then you lose that as soon as you move to the digital platform, and you can keep a book and then you can have a digital, like the way we are doing it now. But really, the act, and as I said, like as soon as I take a book, I want to find a chair or a table, and I want to engage with it, and then I have that conversation. So these layers of meaning that happens in the course of time, you're almost closing the door for that. You're just as soon as you choose this form. So in a way, I'm aware of that. But as Ravi said, it's not that you started off thinking who's going to buy this book. You just started off saying that's an interesting form, and really for me, it just started off as archiving some memories and stuff, and then it moved across from self-reflection to looking at the world in different ways. So it really, I mean, I've been working on around 20, 25 books, or maybe 30, since last 8 years, and they all traverse various boundaries. They also go into different different conceptual, how do you say, bags in a way. Or, I can almost categorize them as 3 or 4 different bodies of work, because it's been quite some time I've been working on various books, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to ask one last question, and then maybe we can open the floor. And hopefully we are on time. Yes, we are on time. Just borrowing from reflection, can we just so you have meticulously in your show, when your show opened, you've sort of had slides which shows us your process of how you document each and every thought which comes in, and you have a volume of your thought process journaled in. Do you see in retrospect that can become a form of an artist book?
At the moment, I have not seen it as an artist book, because I still see it as like just documenting the thought process. Maybe at some point I can see it that way. That flip has not happened.
So you see there is a potential to it.
There is a potential. It will be almost like a collection of seeds, if you want to look at it that way.
Have you had a similar kind of experience?
So are you asking when does a book become artist book?
Yeah, going back to the start. So that's a good way to wrap, I guess.
Yeah, I'll go back to my first answer, that when you deal with the book as a, what are you dealing with? Are you dealing with medium? Then it becomes that sequentiality, and then all that play around sequentiality. I'm not using the word narrative. Or when you really connect to the context in terms of material. Again, I go back to Ravi's example of book about his father, or when it becomes an object. His works, so mine is more around the medium where Ravi has shown material and objectification. So when it becomes an object, when it's still not a book, the book becomes an object of some kind. That's when it changes its identity, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I think we can open up if you have any questions. And I would also like to give a disclaimer. Please ask questions to the artist and not the moderator if you want to gain some more insights about their practice. The floor is open for another 5 minutes. Yeah. Or, yeah. If there are interesting questions, we can extend. Yeah.
I think we answered all the questions.
Hi. Yeah, so my question to you is, can you become an artist overnight?
Maybe one has to write a book for that.
Yes, do you want people to call you an artist, or you want to be an artist? I mean,
Like
the
be an
question is that.
Be an artist. Being a
Then you can. I mean, then the question is who's artist, what is an artist, all that. Maybe you're already an artist. Why there's that doubt?
Okay.
So I believe for an artist to be limitless is what is important. So as the medium of this is a book, so where do you find like being limited at a point, or do you ever find yourself limited to a medium in terms of an idea or a process?
Yeah, when I look back some of the earlier works, I do feel it could have been done differently. And so the lessons are learned, and when you're doing the next work, you try to push the limit a little bit more, and then that's how it keeps expanding and growing further.
Because I believe for an artist, you just see a sky where there's no limit, and you try to break boundaries every single time. So has there any point where you feel that this is what limited my work because my medium was that?
Yeah, the idea that sky is the limit is more like an ideal answer, but it is also possible that you can get entrenched in your own repetitive patterns of thinking, making, and assume that it is your style and language and all that. So unless one can question oneself at least not every time in key junctures, then the growing further will not happen.
Cool, thank you.
Maybe here, instead of sky is the limit, we say number of pages is the limit.
Hi. Ramesh, is more towards your work where we saw the music sheets and the juxtaposition of your own work on top of it. When you because even Ravi, you gave some examples of how you have thought about the thematic, and juxtaposing what can you do to add or subtract. When you look at these forms and structures, what goes in your mind, and how does it feel? What do you consider appropriate to juxtapose on top? Like, do you look at order and chaos? Do you look at wanting to synchronize with their teams? I'd love to know more about your process on what were you thinking with these styles, and when do you think it's more appropriate to work on these thematics?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really delete anything, which is again interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, whenever I think of any work, I'm always overwhelmed by the possibilities. Yeah. So in that particular book, it was trying to. It's almost like I always like the songs where there are two songs playing at the same time at different rhythm. I think that came from my interest in minimalist music, listening to Steve Reich and various Philip Glass and people. So it always had this, if you listen to Steve Reich, that there are certain instruments are running parallel to another instrument, and suddenly they change the course of that and something else pops up, and you almost don't kind of see how something goes silent and then something gets picked up. Really, I mean, I used to trip on listening to Steve Reich's music. So it came from that interest in terms of having two conversations, right? It happens all the time everywhere. whether it's at home or at the Oval Office, right? The two conversations happen where people snap at each other, nobody wants to listen to. So it came from that there's always this noise of conversation. So it's interesting, music, sound, noise, conversation, contradictions, parallels. So that's what was driving me there.
Okay, thank you.
Um, I just wanted to ask, how many mediums have you explored before arriving at paper to say what you want to say, and why paper, and how why paper, and how does that suit
Yeah, Ravi worked essentially with paper, so I would.
No, I had an interest in paper for a long time. Then I went to Glasgow to study paper making. So that further deepened the interest in paper making. And paper making and printmaking and artist books are all related. So in that sense, it was natural to get in that area. It was not like that I tried different mediums and then tick it off, not this, and then came here. It just happened. But later I tried to do books in wood I have done, and I want to do one book in stone. I got the form ready, but I don't know what to write in that. Because stone obviously will survive for ages. So maybe I should just write, Ravi was the best artist living in this age, and leave it somewhere, and then the history will remember me as that. So something like that. I'm thinking of something very mischievous to do in that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So something to do with, I'm just adding, yes, Ravi has extensively worked with the idea of paper as a material and how suddenly they all look like they're made out of stone, even though paper. Then that combination of paper which is looking like a stone, especially with those texts, which is an interesting, again, connect or layered meaning you can arrive at. I think somewhere it's also, for me, it's to do with convenience. I pick up a book and I start a book, and so it starts with that. I know I haven't explored, like Kiefer's book of lead. There are metal books and stone books and things like that. But yeah, as I already said, there's a lot to do.
Probably it's also, as Ramesh was pointing out, the idea of convenience would have driven them to...
No, not for me maybe.
Yeah,
Ravi already said
no,
that I was interested and...
Ravi, I've seen you working and creating your own pulp and then working over your own paper. Do you feel the connect is more when it is from the scratch that you are making the thing, or even when you're working over the found objects? Do you feel there's a difference in connect?
I've done very few works with found books and found objects. Most of the books are like from the scratch. Like I make a clay form and then the POP mold is made. Then I make a fresh sheet of paper, mold it in that. And now I'm doing it in a very different way. Like with pulp painting, I'm creating forms and all that. So I don't know how to answer your question. Connect is, involvement is more, I would say.
Yeah.
Involvement and even control and the way you can calibrate is more when I'm starting from the scratch. Yeah.
I find the connect by scratching the book first. So it's the other way around. So it's a connect is how you connect. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel it's almost like laboring. So labor, when you think of how much you spend time, is that what gives you an idea of connect? Or, I mean, there are books I've done it in 3 days, there are books I've done took 3 years. I mean, not to sit and work on it every day, but then I did some and then left it, came back, left it. So it's not about really labor. Yes, the one easiest thing to connect as humans, the labor becomes an interesting connect between you and the outcome. But for me, sometimes it's not to do with labor.
It's not the amount of time it took to make it.
I just wanted to extend a little bit on what Jayasimha said in the last question about, I think, the rough drawing. You know, what does a rough drawing mean to both of you in terms of does a drawing, is it something that you think about and it turns into something else? Have you all made complete rough books that you all make, that become the art book, or you make a replica of the rough work? What does rough work mean to you as process, as something that you constantly work with? Are there mistakes? Is the whole thing, you know, just the idea of it?
No, personally, I don't do this rough sketch kind of thing, where I plan and then execute. Doesn't happen. I have some initial idea, then I jump into it, and then you, as you go along, you navigate the, you sometimes you sing, sometimes you make mistake, you find a way of, making use of the mistake and so on. So I don't have this practice of making a rough. You figure out all the answers and then make a finer version. I don't do that.
Yeah, same here. I don't think I get into this is a key sketch for a book. Maybe the book itself is a key sketch and sometimes it fails. Yeah, there are failed books which I don't think I'll ever show, but then there are learnings from that gets, so if you're calling that failed book as a rough book, then it is there. But yeah, so when you start, it's not a rough sketch or a key sketch or the plan for a book, but when you start it is, but then sometimes it might not go anywhere.
Hi, sorry, one more question. So you set off a chain of thoughts in my mind when you took up the stone anecdote. So I wanted to talk about, ask you about the idea of permanence or longevity. Like, for example, artist books or sketch books, you draw, you ideate, create wherever you are, and the idea of convenience comes from there. Such as the iPad, you draw on Procreate or whatever, and now that digital archive is lost in a certain way. And so my question is, do you, when you spring up an idea and you portray it in a form, do you also think about how this artwork would live in a long period of time after you, or considering that, how do you see the idea of permanence or longevity with your artwork? How does it age or such?
Very difficult question. No, first of all, there is one confusion there which I want to clarify.
Yeah.
Sketchbooks, many people think are artist books. They're not.
Okay.
They're just sketchbooks.
Just sketchbooks.
So it's not like 100 sketches you do in a day, go to station and then, unless there is an intentionality to make an artist book, I wouldn't call it an artist book.
Okay.
That is just a sketchbook, that's all. So that is one thing. And second, I was working a lot with paper, and once I made one book with cement. So then I realized the vulnerability of paper. Then I thought I should do one in stone. Then you understand the the time span it can survive, and then what it means. Like, for example, when the kings did their stone these epigraphs and all that, they wanted their image of themselves to be remembered in a certain way. He may or may not be good king, but he wanted people to remember it like that. So that is, I think, the idea of legacy and all that comes in that. So as the paper looks vulnerable, but it can survive in a good, properly made paper. 100 years it can survive. It's an archival quality paper and all that. So it's a question of who will survive longer than the paper I made and what is written on that. And then I also bring the connection with oral tradition. If I am saying something in just words, then how long that will survive? And then something made in paper, written on paper. So all these three different kind of, like there is this Zen tradition of making drawings in sand.
Yeah.
Right? But it can erase it. So
Yeah, yeah.
when I think of time and material, I bring all these connections there and muddle it
Okay.
up.
Okay. Cool. No, sorry, because the thought behind this that there's a lot of gratitude, I think, for me here to be able to see your work and have you guys talk about it. And sometimes I sit, like we have these Monday morning meetings where we have seen artist sketchbooks, and we don't get the opportunity to listen to the artist at the same time. So I think this talk has been quite amazing in that sense. So thank you so much, guys.
Start drawing in that Monday morning meeting.
Yes, totally.
Well, thank you, Nilay. I think, thank you, Ravi.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Ramesh,
Thank you.
for this fantastic evening.